How's it going, guys? Today we got the 1974 Dodge Charger. Today what I want to do is, for the first, episode 0 of this channel, is I'd like to go through everything that has been done to the Charger from purchase up until episode 1 of the video. Going over a couple of things with the car. The car was purchased in 2016. Now, most of the video footage that you are going to see is from 2021. A lot of stuff has been done to it. Over the majority of that time has been bodywork. But fast forward to when we first purchased the car, it was an absolute basket case. And when I say basket case, I mean seats were removed, carpet was removed, seat belts were removed, hood, doors, barn find kind of situations. And they lift up the garage door, and there it was. Tires had no air in them, parts were missing. It was full of dust, but it was definitely a barn find to a T. As soon as those doors opened, I saw the chrome right on the fender, right on the front grille of the car. It was just, I had to have this car. I just loved the look of it, looking over every little detail. Even me being a lot younger then, had like ashtrays, and to me, from this generation, smoking isn't as common as it was back in the 70s, where they actually had ashtrays in every single one of the cars. So I had a lot of fascination within this car. Me and my dad planned to do it was long overdue at this point. We were looking for a project car, something father and son, something to do together, as kind of like a bonding exercise. Because I was always interested in cars. I always loved Camaros. I always loved a Charger, Challenger, even a Mustang here and there. I've always loved muscle cars. And seeing this car there, I was like, this is the car. This is what I want to build. This is cool. So even though it was a basket case with, literally stuff pulled off of it all over the place, it was something that I really wanted it. So we purchased it in 2016, and we kind of just worked on it from there. We ended up stripping most of the paint, most of the primer that was already on the car. We didn't go completely bare metal. We went down extremely far. It still has that vinyl white top that came from the factory, from as far as I can tell. Removing a lot of these parts took a long time, and trying to actually put all the tape and all the parts together and parts bins, trying to make sure that when we put this car together later on, we had all the parts necessary to do so. So luckily, even though that this car was kind of a basket case, we got extremely lucky, as in the car was clean. And that was a major factor for us. The car was mostly clean. It was clean to the point that you lifted up even parts of the carpet underneath where you would expect, to see the ground. You actually didn't. It was just solid pans all around. So really not a lot of welding. Actually, we didn't have to do any welding. In the trunk we had, pinholes where you could see the sun through, and that was it. So all those were kind of patched up correctly using both POR 15, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a very strong bonding agent, and also kind of a rust proofing agent. It's on the expensive side, but from my experience, it has been totally worth it, and so far has been really great on the car. You can paint over it. It's really, so far, a really good product. A lot of guys have recommended it to me, therefore why I've used it. What I did for the trunk, there's a couple little metal pieces on there. Put a little bit of that black stuff. It's cement. You could hit it with a hammer and it's still going to stay. So, absolutely fantastic product. If you're looking to rust proof a couple of things, really love it. It's thin enough to sit within that rust and create a nice bond so it doesn't rust anymore. One of the things that started with this car was, what color do I want it? Because the original color was a frosty green metallic, and I'll bring up a little brochure for you so you can see all the colors. I want to say it was 12 or 13 on there. But they show you all these different colors of that, what you could have got in 1974 with this car. And the frosty green metallic was just, it matched the interior of the car, but it wasn't something to the car that I was like, ooh, I gotta have this green. I did not like it. And I'll tell you a little bit more on how I chose that color when we get into the engine department a little bit. But I ended up choosing the Sublime Metallic. And it's a very high metallic flake paint. So when you spray this back and forth, it's very hard trying to get those metal flakes to lay flat. And that was kind of the major challenge when spraying this car. But as a couple of pictures I will also show you here, the car paint turned out fantastic. But in order to get to that point, it took, I don't even know, it took years of body work, just making sure every panel we were happy with on this car. Because in 1974 and even up to early 80s or even 90s, these cars were not considered desirable. And to this day, I don't think that they're still considered desirable by most people. A lot of your older Mustangs and even the 70s Charger, Camaro, 69 Camaro, a little bit older than that, are considered very desirable. And the 74 Charger is just in that era of not being super desirable, which is both a blessing and a curse. Parts are going to be really hard to find. Throughout this whole entire series, you're going to hear us talk about the parts that we both cannot find on the secondhand market, but also in the third-party market. And the reason why it's so hard to find these things is just it's not a very popular car. If you look at a 1970 Charger or 1970 or even 69 Camaro, you're going to be able to find those parts because they're very desirable cars. You're going to be able to find fenders, glass, literally anything that you name it, they're going to have it. But for this 74 B-body, it's been extremely, extremely, extremely hard to find parts. For example, one of the things that has been an absolute pain to find, I've been looking for quite a few years now, at least 3 years, the bench seat sliders, which you'll be able to find in a later episode upcoming from this video. I want to say it's going to be episode 7 or 8. We were lucky enough to find bench seat sliders, but they weren't specifically for the B-body that we have now. We had to retrofit them, and currently the guys that had them wanted $400, and they're rusted out. And when I say rusted out, there's actually pieces of metal missing from them. So we'd have to make our own pieces onto these already $400 sliders for bench seats, which for me, this is a car, father and son. I don't have $80,000, $90,000 to spend on this car. I have a set budget, with bills, expenses, just like anybody else out there. I don't have a bunch of money to pour into this car, and especially during then when I was going to college, I definitely didn't have that kind of money. So especially on this car, fighting with B-body. So what I've been able to find on the interior of this car, since we're still talking about the interior, is that it is a green interior. One of the things that I have had a very hard time finding is that with the base, you'll see the base, you'll see the coupe, hardtop, and then SE. And I do have the original VIN. I have decoded it. To my knowledge, this is a hardtop with a white vinyl top, but it still remains all the green interior. But the weird thing about this is that it has the bench seats from the base. From what I can tell, they're the base, because they have a both vinyl, but also they do have kind of a cloth. A couple of people I've talked to that are very popular in the B-body community have told me that these seats are kind of a rarity, because most of them that you see is you'll see the leather bucket seats, usually non-green, usually black is the most common, so it's already kind of rare in that standpoint, being green. Then I've seen the bench seats where it kind of has that center divider. It kind of, even in the newer trucks, how it's like a bench seat and then the center folds down for like cup holders and stuff. That's kind of what you see in these cars, and even in the higher trim levels. But you usually don't see these vinyl / cloth green seats. So talking to a lot of guys, these are kind of a rare, it's just kind of a rare base / kind of premium model. I don't want to say it's premium because a lot of the car is a base model, but there are a couple of premium features that are on the VIN that are subject to let you know that this car is like in between kind of the two. It's not an SE, but it's not a base. It's kind of interesting. Everything I've checked, the 727 in it and the 318 are definitely factory. All the parts are original on it except for what I've changed out from it. But it's been kind of a crazy journey because you usually don't see these kind of cars optioned like this. So it's kind of a cool rarity. It's definitely cool to me. So I'm glad I can share those details with you. So let's get on to the actual powertrain of this vehicle. So it's got a 318. I know, nothing crazy like a 340, 440, something super high tech or, lots of horsepower. So a lot of people have asked me, why in the world did you go with a 318 with the car? And I'll tell you why. The 318, according to multiple different sources that I've talked to, conversed with, the 318 doesn't have, 800 horsepower potential or anything like that. I understand that. It's a high nickel content block. But the thing is with the 318, it's one of those reliable power makers. And talking to a bunch of other guys, they said, well, you can go with like a 340, but you're going to put money in the block. You could go with a 440, but now you got to change stuff. So I want you to put yourself in my shoes. I was a young kid. I was about 18, 19 when building this engine. And when I was looking at the engine, there's a lot of cost differences. And I had to do something that was within my budget. I was looking at buying like crate engines for like a 440 or even a 318. And at the time, crate engines were $10,000. And $10,000 for me was a lot of money. And I guess it still is today. $10,000 for a new built 318 is a lot of money. And being a college kid, I'm paying off college. I'm working multiple jobs. And I want to get this car done. It just wasn't in my budget. So we contacted Hanson Performance, who was local to us, and we brought over the engine. He's like, yeah, I'll be able to get to it. What are your kind of performance gains you're kind of looking for? What kind of numbers, and both in your price point and horsepower you're looking for? And I was like, it doesn't really matter to me. I'd like it to be a preppy engine. I don't want it to be a slowpoke. But I do want it to be within my budget. But at the same time, I really want to learn. And he was like, well, do you want to sit down with me and work on this engine? And I was like, absolutely. So it was an hour drive for me to get to his location, his shop. And I would come there a couple of nights a week. I would definitely drive the miles because this isn't, it would be great to have someone else build this for me. And I know it would have took 2 years or even a year, depending on his schedule to do. But the thing is, I really wanted to build it, but I didn't have the knowledge to build an engine. My dad didn't really have the tools to build the engine, especially at that time. And he was able to take me underneath his wing and actually work on this car. And I can't believe the amount of stuff that I learned building this 318 and knowing that it's going to be in this car, it's going to be running, and it's going to be a healthy engine. It's a phenomenal experience, and I've learned so much from that experience that I feel so confident that whatever engine I will be putting in future vehicles, I would either like to build myself, or at least be with someone who knows more than me to put together the next engine for my vehicles. And I'm very excited to build my next engine. So sitting down looking at this engine, it was one of our first days looking at it. He's like, well, we got to pull off heads. We got to, we got to pull out pistons. We got to see what condition this block is even in before we continue, before we even think about continuing with this 318 block. And we kind of tear it down, and we notice that there is both a ridge, super common. Cars with this kind of mileage have it. But the weird thing is, it was previously honed I don't know if it was owner or the guy before the owner. It was hand honed, and unfortunately, it was at an angle. So we were both kind of worried that, this block might not be good. We might have to put sleeves in this block. We just weren't sure. And looking at it right off the bat, we weren't happy because it looked like he was trying to hand hone it within the car, without taking out the engine and doing it properly. So if we would have started up this engine, especially from him, he was telling us it was a known good engine. It was in the car, just turnkey, fix everything up. It wasn't. And, I wasn't expecting it to be a good engine, which is, it's a good thing. Always, double check lines, pull engines when you know that they're probably not going to run, or if you're unsure, because you can save your engine by just doing a couple of these little things. We continued with the process. We looked, and it turned out the engine was still good. So we cleaned it, we honed it, stroked it out, added a lot more compression. We did every little bit of that engine together, me and Hanson Performance. And I can't thank him enough because he was absolutely fantastic. Any question I had, he answered it. He always gave an explanation. Even when I was talking about an exhaust system with this guy, he even drew up the difference between, Flowmaster, Magnaflow, even a couple other manufacturers out there. And he was just an absolutely great teacher. And for me, being one-on-one with someone else, it's just one of those experiences that I'll never forget. And me being, young, still I'm even young today, I want to pass this down to other generations of what I've learned. Same thing with Uncle Tony. He works with what he has. And he's definitely helped me a lot so far on this build. Even asking questions in a couple of forums or in the comments, he has always helped me. I've even talked to him a couple of times. Super helpful guy. He knows his Dodge history, but also his specs on his stuff. He's been fantastic. Fast forward, this 318, it's honed, it's built, it's put together, it's ready to go. We try to get it on a dyno. We asked this guy multiple times. He's more in the big leagues types of stuff, and he was never able to dyno our engine, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, whatever this engine makes, I'm happy with it, because to me, it's a father-son project. I don't even care if this thing put out 100 horsepower. To me, it's something that me and my dad built together, and to me, that means more than any other horsepower figure out there in the world. Down in the past here, 30, 40 years, whenever this 318 decides to give out, blow up, and I have a little bit of extra money saved up, maybe I'll put like a 340 in it or a 360 stroker, we'll see. But for right now, this car has been definitely a father-son bonding, and it's something that I could never sell, and it's something that means more to me, spending that time with my dad, having memories inside this car, so that one day when he does pass, I have something to remember him by, and this car is going to be something that I'm never going to forget about him. And that's what this whole project and experience has been for me. And to keep something old and classic in the family, it's just kind of like an heirloom, and it's fantastic to me, and I'm super stoked to have this experience. All right, so here's the 727 rebuild on the car. Transmission was taken out of it. Me and my dad removed it from the vehicle itself. The shift linkage was all kinds of messed up. It was a mess. I have looked at so many different documents trying to figure this out previous to the headers, which you'll see in another episode where I'll explain more on the shift linkage. But I actually took the 727 to a transmission shop where they've built these transmissions 100 times. Anyone you talk to, the 727 automatic transmission, it's a bulletproof transmission. It's really just a fantastic transmission. Even Dodge has a couple other transmissions that are quite good. But this one was rebuilt for me. They found some weird stuff in the transmission. The one thing that I want to keep stressing to you young buyers of classic cars is whatever you do, if you don't know your stuff about cars, but you want a classic car, I highly recommend bringing someone with you or understanding the risks of, hey, I might have to do all of this wiring harness or redo all of this engine or all of the transmission. I want you to know that, because in my experience, I had definitely an engine that was not suitable if I were to just start it. It just was not suitable. With the 727, it was the same thing. We found external oil coolers for the transmission, and after talking to quite a few people, are like, you overheated the 727? Like that, I didn't think that was possible. And I was like, well, that's what this guy did. And he's like, well, I don't think that he knew what he was doing. So fast forward to getting this transmission rebuilt. They took a look at it, and there was actual metal shavings within the transmission. It looked like someone was digging for something or trying to do something to it. We couldn't really figure that point out, but it definitely needed a transmission rebuild. So it was great. It's rebuilt. It's got a shift kit in it, and it's definitely easily you'll handle 400 horsepower. So now that we covered most of this car, we covered kind of, the interior, the engine, the transmission, the trunk. One of the things that, if you are looking for a B-body car, specifically Dodge from 71 to 74, they're kind of a hassle as in parts. For example, it is still COVID-19, the pandemic. This is being recorded 8/30/2021. There's been a lot of issues trying to get parts, because this has been my ultimate push this year and last year, getting this car roadworthy, drivable, and done, completed. There's been a lot of hassles and issues with this car. Number one, the gas tank. Super simple. Sounds like everyone should have this, right? 71, 72, 73, and 74 gas tanks are all different, and it has been an absolute pain. So you could get a 71, 72 gas tank for about $200 on the high end. You could go with a couple of other different manufacturers. You could get them for that. It'll technically fit up in the car, but not correct, because the 74 has a hump in it for emissions for the vent lines. So even 73 has the vent lines off the side. And I'll show you a couple of pictures so you can see what I'm talking about. But the 74 gas tank is completely different. That was a $400 part. So it cost me almost twice as much for this part. But on top of that, I was on a waiting list for months and months and months and months and months until I finally canceled my order. And I was actually looking for another part, and it actually popped up, and I was able to buy it from someone else. But I was looking actively for 6 or plus months for this gas tank. I had a hard time finding it. I don't know about you guys, but it's been a hard time finding parts. The parts that I have found, even the common parts, are getting more and more expensive. I remember I bought headers for, dirt cheap, and now they're 3 times the amount of what I paid for them back in 2018, 2019. So I had most of the parts, but a lot of this stuff is just becoming harder and harder to find. And even if you do find some of the stuff, even if you can find the stuff brand new, we're having issues. Uncle Tony has seen these issues. Anyone who works in a garage has seen these issues. It's just kind of a parts fiasco. You go and replace one part that you think is broken, and then you replace it, and it still doesn't work, and you're like, well, what's going on? It still could be that part, but not all the time. But it's just part of the car game. So I hope you guys loved the story about this 1974 Dodge Charger, how I both acquired it, what kind of issues it kind of came up with, kind of stuff that we rebuilt together, the fantastic people I've met, and both the people on the forums, Uncle Tony, bunch of local people who understand Mopars. I want to thank all of you because this car could not be what it is today without everyone else. And I can't thank you guys enough. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Don't feel free to like and subscribe. And we're going to have a lot of episodes coming up. I think I have a lot coming up for you guys, and you guys should be definitely excited. Thank you again.